to this talk. So let me welcome you to this end of the series on regional development and prospects of cooperation in the Caucasus. Just to tell you briefly where we are coming from with the idea to organize something like this. So we essentially aim to bring together experts from the region to discuss shared challenges the region is facing and potential areas of cooperation. And more importantly, I mean, I was discussing this with Dr. Saxena yesterday, that we often get stuck in discussing the challenges and don't often move to discussing the possible solutions. So this is what we are really hoping for. And we will be, I mean, today we'll be looking at economic connectivity, but in other talks by bringing together other experts at political dialogue, civil society, and so on. And just to move on quickly to why we are all here, to Dr. Taleh Ziyadov. So we are very lucky to have such an expert on the topic, someone who did his PhD on economic connectivity in wider wider Central Eurasian region. He is currently the head of executive director of the Port of Baku. He also advised several private and public international companies on transport, logistics, supply chain management in the Caspian region. And he completed his master's from Georgetown University School of Foreign Service. And as I've already mentioned, PhD from Cambridge University, and subsequently his book based on his PhD was published, titled Azerbaijan as a Regional Hub in Central Eurasia. He was also Deputy Executive Director of the US-Azerbaijan Chamber of Commerce in Washington, and Associate Dean for Academic Affairs and Research, Senior Research Fellow at ADA University. So thank you very much, Dr. Ziyadov. Let me also introduce to all of you the moderator of this talk, Dr. Saxena, who is the director of the Cambridge Central Asia Forum. He is also a co-investigator at GCRF Compass project. Some of you have heard of or are part of actually. He's also a principal research associate at the Cavendish Lab at the University of Cambridge, and also a lecturer at the Center of Development Studies, and most importantly, a friend of many of us, and even more importantly, my PhD supervisor. So I yield the floor to Dr. Saxena. Thank you, and enjoy the talk.
Thank you very much, Jakub, and thank you, Taleh, for joining us. Apart from the formal introduction with Jakub provided, Taleh has been a great friend for many years. He was a very important, one of the first, I would say, ambassadors of Azerbaijan and also the Caucasus to Cambridge community, and he helped to organize with us the celebrations of cultural ones in Nowruz, and connecting many people, showcasing the region. So it's really amazing that now he is in a position to act out in connectivity. And with that, I would like to just say a few thoughts why it's quite important moment for us to engage in this kind of a discourse, learn more about the actual happenings in the region from those who are leading it, like himself. What is extremely important is that we discuss the geographies, the geography of Caucasus in a very remote sense. But the fact that, by remote, I mean we talk about them as separate units, separate countries and borders. However, it's an ancient geography, ancient geology, which is interconnected in its own way. It has its own way of functioning, and it has been an attractive, prosperous region historically. That's why people have always wanted to go there. People have always wanted to rule it and control it because there's a value in it. And now today we have spent last several hundred years of changing of borders and people and finding ways of connecting and interconnecting. So here today I would really like to invite Taleh to kind of lead us through the latest development to this very exciting project of Port of Baku, how it is playing an important role in not only connecting the region itself, but the region, connecting region to the rest of the global projects that are happening as well. So Taleh, over to you, please.
Dr. Saxena, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to see you. Unfortunately, we are seeing each other over Zoom at this time, and a lot of you others who are participating. I hope you and your families and your loved ones are healthy and staying safe. Hopefully this pandemic is going to end soon and we're going back to our normal lives. Although everything has its own implications, and certainly this pandemic has taught us new things and introduced new things. And maybe in the past we were not doing a lot of things online, but now we started using online Zoom and video conferences much often, and we realized the benefit of it. I will, with your permission, do a small correction, Jacob, regarding my PhD thesis, because my PhD thesis is on resource curse, which is not very much relevant to what is happening in Azerbaijan and also in all other states. But part of my PhD time, when I started, I did spend on this topic, and I did produce a book that you mentioned that was published at ADA University. And today we are also going to partly talk about that. So as you know, as Dr. Saxena mentioned, this Caucasus is a very interesting place. I would call it, we are maybe a central part of Central Eurasia. It has always been as a major interconnector between Asia and Europe, a melting pot, if you may, of different religions, different cultures, and all the roots that were connecting Asia and Europe were at one point was crossing through this region. It had a large implications on the regional culture as well as its economics. And with your permission, before we kind of dwell into what is going on today, I think it's important for us to maybe look into what we would like to, at least in Azerbaijan, would like to see as the next 10 years. And for that, maybe I will take you a little back to the past, to the ancient Silk Road, and a little bit describe how life and economics and trade was then at the time, and what sort of new Silk Road is being built now, and what implications it is going to have for the entire region as a whole. So I will, with your permission, share a presentation on which I hope you see this one.
Yeah.
Do you see the presentation? So, and first of all, I would like to start with the main map that is may or may not be necessarily exactly accurate with the namings and all that stuff, but that's not the most important part of this presentation. It's important to, when you look at this map, we see some of the names which are famous in history. Yes, Bukhara, Merv, Baghdad, and all these places. But it is very important to understand how the ancient Silk Road was, what it was the engine of ancient Silk Road work was. And I give you a simple example. Today, for us, it's very familiar that we talk about containers, big ocean liners. You know, at the time, there were no ocean liners, no containers. Everything was done by camels. And believe it or not, camels used to travel about 40 kilometers a day. Every 40 kilometers, you had to stop. And there was what we call a small caravanserai, or in modern sense of it, there was a small hotel of 1 star. So it didn't have much amenities. You just slept over, fed your animals, you continued your journey. About 200 kilometers or so, you hit small townships. Again, there was a caravanserai, maybe a slightly bigger one, maybe 3-star, but then you continued your journey because your first destination was about 1,000 kilometers away, which was big megapolis. So these were 5 stars. So just imagine the entire Eurasia covered with these 1 stars, 3 stars, and 5 stars. And certainly 5 stars were these big cities like Bukhara, Samarkand, Merv, Baghdad, Aleppo, Jerusalem, Istanbul. And action really took place in 5 stars. Why? Because in 1 star and 3 star, you didn't spend much time. It was for you as a transit point. You just passed over. But in 5 stars, you lived for a couple of months. You sold your stuff, you bought some stuff, but you also got engaged in all the new innovations, in the discussions. Whatever new things came at the time came from 5 stars. So these were, in a way, places of innovation. These were Silicon Valleys of the time. So history does not record any big names that came from a village. You know, I don't know anyone who is known in the science field, in the mathematics field, or whatever, that came from a small village. They may have been born in a small village, but they ended up in one of these 5 stars through which they became famous. Samarkandis, Bukharis, Baghdadis, all these big names, they came with the affiliation to this one of the 5 stars. Why I'm telling this? Because the traders had the radius of trade about 3,000 kilometers. So beyond 3,000 kilometers, a Chinese, for example, would never aim to travel to Europe to buy some European products. Europeans certainly didn't travel to China to buy Chinese goods. You know the story of Marco Polo, his uncle, and his father. They ended up in China by pure accident because they primarily traded in Istanbul, in Crimea, and they ended up in Bukhara purely by accident because 2 Mongol brothers fought and they couldn't kind of return to Crimea. They had to reroute across Caspian, and that's how they ended up in Bukhara. So this tells you that these 5-star hubs, in a way, were acting as a transmission places for major innovations and trade. Why this is important? Because we are at the verge of emerging 21st century hubs. In the next 10 years, and thanks to this is, I have to recognize, this is primarily going to be in many ways by the efforts of China, One Belt, One Road initiative, which is going to kind of help all these hubs to reach their optimum and aims that they initiated. And we are going to see new hubs that are going to emerge across Eurasia, like Poti in Georgia, Mersin in Turkey, Turkmenbashi in Turkmenistan, Korgos and Aktau, Kurik, these are the places in Kazakhstan, a couple of places in Russia, several places in Iran, including Bandar Abbas, Bandar Khomeini. All these places are going to emerge as hubs, new hubs of the 21st century. And these places are going to, in a way, start acting in their traditional form of hubs that used to be in the ancient 21st century. Because a simple statistics, if you look at the statistic for the last year, a number of containers that was transshipped between Russia and Europe just last year was close to 1 million TEU. 2 years before, this number was only about 300,000 TEU. So it more than 3 times rise, despite the fact that last year was a COVID year. So this tells you that with the new technologies such as railways and the interconnectivity between these larger markets are opening new gateways for the development. The question is obviously, what is going to happen to Azerbaijan, South Caucasus region? And from the start, from about 2007 or so, Azerbaijan government has decided to move the port from the main Baku city, which is a downtown, to about south, slightly south, about 65 kilometers south, to a place called Alat. Alat is a small township which is within the administrative borders of the greater Baku area, but it is located at the crossroads of north-south and east-west corridors. All our interconnection, railways, highways, maritime connection, they come to Alat. And I will show you in the map further down where this strategic location is. And obviously the strategy of Azerbaijan is to, in a way, rebuild these ancient hub concepts and come to, in a way, try to interconnect these larger economies that are around you, to making sure that you interconnect them, but not only in the terms of transit. As I told you in the beginning of the presentation, a Chinese container or an Indian container coming and passing through Azerbaijan, okay, it's good. You become then as a transit country. But what is important for you is not just let them pass through you, because you as a country, you as a size-wise, obviously Azerbaijan is a small country, in South Caucasus, a relatively small region when you compare to just, for example, to Kazakhstan or Russia. These places are big, their territories are large, they can earn from transit tariffs quite a sizable amount of revenues. But when your territory is small, transit alone is not going to make an impact on your economy. So what you need to do is you need to try to bring that container to your country, open it, take whatever is inside, add value, and then re-export wherever it goes. And as you can see from this map, for example, these are the existing countries near Azerbaijan with the big economies. And as you can see from China, India, Turkey, Russia, and Europe, these are sizable markets that are around us. And within the 1,000 kilometer radius, there are 130 million people that live around Azerbaijan in the South Caucasus, in a sense. In 3.5-hour flight distance from Baku, you can reach 45 countries. So this also adds to intermodality. So some of the containers you can bring from China, for example. From China, we bring a container via Kazakhstan in about 6 days. So if you bring a container from China in 6 days, you can add value for a day or two, and they're airlifted to London, to Frankfurt, to any other countries that you want to get your product as soon as possible. And this obviously has a lot of implications, because if you look at the larger map of Eurasia, you will see that in the neighborhood, in the larger neighborhood, there are not many hubs that serve this 130 million people. The closest one is Dubai, as you know, you are familiar, because it's in the south. It serves primarily GCC countries, but in the absence of other hubs in the north of Iran, Dubai naturally also serves some of the places in Central Asia, in Azerbaijan, South Caucasus, as well as South Russia. And another hub is obviously Istanbul, which serves primarily Southeast Europe. But in the absence, as I said, of hub in our region, that also serves us. So Azerbaijan is obviously aiming to become one of these hubs, and also position itself in such a way that it is not just a transit country, like a 3-star one, but once something is going to serve and add value. For this, the strategy of the government is to make sure that the port itself is also becomes not just an infrastructure or in a way, a door that you enter and exit, but something where you will be able to add value. And that's why in 2018, the government has passed a free zone law in Azerbaijan, which I would say it's probably the most progressive, the most liberal free zone law that has been passed in the world in the last 10 years. Other than the criminal law of Azerbaijan, nothing of the national legislation applies in the free zone, which means every other legislation that is going to govern the free zone will have to be drafted from scratch. Why? Because it has to be drafted for the needs of the 21st century business. So this is a very progressive approach to new business. If you are creating something new for the new century, that has to accommodate certain things for the businesses that is going to operate in, let's say, 2030, 2035. And I can imagine the businesses that are going to operate in the next decade, they are going to probably trade with even corporate currency, not even, you know, cryptocurrency is one thing, but I think in the future you may also have these corporate currencies, and all these things are requiring certain legislative frameworks which are not easy to apply. If you remember the case of Estonia, for example, a couple of years ago, Estonia wanted to introduce e-euro, electronic euro. In a way, if you look at it, it's a quite simple idea. You just, instead of having a physical kind of euro, you want to introduce electronic euro, but Central Bank of European Union did not allow it because they were not ready for it, although Estonia was ready for it. So this tells you that institutionally, there are certain regulatory frameworks that may not necessarily open the door for your kind of innovative new ideas. When you have a free zones like in Azerbaijan, in Alat, this opens a lot of new opportunities where you can actually tailor your legislation towards the new business or new trends in the business. So having said this, now I will come back to our original concept and our region as a whole. As you know, recently there was, meaning last year, in October, November, there was this 44-day war between Armenia and Azerbaijan, which resulted in liberation of some of the territories that was held under occupation for a long time. But I am going to look at it purely as an opportunity, because if you look at the maps that you can see here, and some of you may not know, but for example, a city of Julfa in Nakhchivan, and Nakhchivan is a exclave of Azerbaijan separated by Armenia. Julfa alone in the Soviet times. Julfa alone in the Soviet times. My head is actually obstructing some of the view, but in Nakhchivan, here it's actually much more visible. As you can see, this used to be a former railway that was connecting, in a way, Soviet railway system to Armenia, also to Nakhchivan. And this railway is also connected to Iran and also Middle East. During the Soviet Union times, believe it or not, close to 3 million tons of cargo used to travel on this line between, let's say, Soviet Union, entire Soviet Union, including Russia and all other republics, and Iran and the Middle East. All this traffic was coming through north of Azerbaijan, going south via this railway through Armenia, and from Julfa, the city in Nakhchivan, it used to go directly to Iran and further down within the Iranian and not to Turkey, but primarily through Iran to the Middle East and further down. So this is a very critical part of infrastructure that for a long time, close to now 27, 28 years, have been idle. So now, obviously, on the maps, there are these lines that we see. In actuality, there are no physical railways now, primarily from Fizuli all the way to Nakhchivan border, including the Armenia. There are no railways, but this could be, in a very efficient way, be restored. And this is going to be one of the interconnectors that could benefit both Armenia and also all the regional players that are interested in opening up new routes. Another way to look at it is, obviously, if you look at the greater map, as you can see, Turkey has a very little border with Azerbaijan via Nakhchivan. There is about 11 or 12 kilometers of border between Turkey and Azerbaijan via Nakhchivan over this line. And there is obviously traffic of trucks and not railway at the moment, but trucks are basically traveling. But those trucks up to recently, and not yet, but hopefully in the future, they will be able to travel to both Armenia and also Azerbaijan and Central Asia. So this also opens up a lot of, actually shortens a distance between Mediterranean ports like Mersin, Iskenderun, and also Port of Baku and Central Asia. So I will try to maybe switch to Google Map and see if I can bring Google Map. I don't have it here, but yeah, I don't have it. But on the Google Map, you will be able to see much clearer that the distance from Mediterranean ports of Turkey to Nakhchivan and from there to Azerbaijan is much closer. And last year alone, we had a record of trucks coming from Europe, from Turkey, going to Central Asia and backwards. More than 43,000 trucks have transpassed through Port of Baku. This is a record high. We have never had such amount of trucks coming and going through Port of Baku. Yes, COVID crisis have kind of maybe had some positive impact on it, meaning Central Asian, obviously, countries are landlocked. So a lot of cargo that is going to Central Asia and from Central Asia to the world, they come through us. But I think this trend is going to increase with the opening up of some of the transportation routes that are affiliated, that we are currently discussing. So in general, I think whatever I've described regarding to Azerbaijan as a hub, you can extrapolate this and apply it directly to South Caucasus. If you look at the map and you just calculate the population of Azerbaijan, Georgia, Armenia, we all together we are not more than 20 million. So if you look at the map and you want to position yourself in the global map of economics and how your economies are going to develop, you cannot claim that with 10 million Azerbaijan by itself, or let's say 3 million Armenia by itself, or 5 million Georgians by itself are going to develop kind of uncoordinatedly without close integration. It is not a secret that a much coordinated, much integrated region has much more value for an international business who wants to serve this region, who wants to serve this 130 million people around South Caucasus, including South Caucasus itself. The key for successful hub strategy is the following. First, you have to have a proper infrastructure. Without proper roads, highways, ports, you will never be able to have a hub concept or hub strategy. That's why the majority of money that Azerbaijan, for example, has spent in the last decade from oil went to rebuilding, modernizing, or fully building from scratch new airports, new port, a complete east-west, north-south highways and railways, because this was an essential prerequisite for the country to become a hub. So other countries, obviously, in the South Caucasus need to, I know that Georgia has been doing it, Armenia has been doing it as well, but Armenia, for objective reasons, have been limited because interconnection with Turkey and Azerbaijan wasn't there. Now the opportunities come to upscale it and interconnect, then new opportunities are going to open up. And second, after interconnection, second, after building your infrastructure, the second point is you have to interconnect. As much as you may have five-star, class 3 or class, the best roads, highways, airports, but if they are not connected to your neighbors, to major ports, airports, and economies, you are still not going to reach the potential of your hub concept. Meaning, Port of Baku is well connected, for example, with Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, and other ports on the Caspian. We are railways well connected with Georgia, with Poti, Batumi, and now with the Baku-Tbilisi-Kars railway with Turkey, to Mediterranean, to Mersin, as well as to Istanbul and Europe. And just recently, for example, there was a launch of the first train that actually came from Turkey via Baku-Tbilisi-Kars railway from Georgia. It went to Russia. This was the first train that came from Turkey via this route and went to Russia. And obviously, with opening up new rails via Armenia, there will be a number of such trains coming both from Armenia to Russia and the other way around, but also maybe in the future from Turkey to Russia and Central Asia via that route. And this is opening a lot of opportunities. So the second one, after you build your infrastructure, the second one is interconnection. Connectivity to your immediate neighborhood and to a larger economies like Europe. In regional context, obviously, this is Russia, Iran, Turkey. Further down, obviously, India, Pakistan. Further south, this is China and even Japan. And on this side, obviously, this is EU. This interconnection has to work together for you to realize your hub concept. And the third one is obviously you have to have selected, assigned hub cities. Currently, they may be small. For example, Alat currently is a small place, town. But in the future, Alat is going to turn into one of these megapolis hubs that is going to be one of the major logistic hubs. China alone, as far as I know, they have done the same strategy. They went to building infrastructure internally. They went then interconnecting with the neighbors, including maritime. And third, they went into building hubs internally, close to 200 plus hubs China is going to create internally. But then they are also going to select certain places outside of China, which they are going to strategically use as a hub places, where cargoes from China, for example, will be going, or from Europe is going to arrive. And then these places are going to act as a major hub and value add logistic places. So for us, we have chosen a major place like Alat. Jufa has a potential in other parts on the border areas with Russia, Iran, Turkey, all these places. And I'm sure the same logic also applies to our neighboring countries. They are also now going to identify some of the hub concepts and hub places where they are going to dedicate their prime kind of focus. And this is going to, in a very simple sense, I give you a simple example. In 10 years' time, maybe even faster, a student who is, let's say, in Tabriz, in Iran, is going to look up on internet, on Amazon or Alibaba, doesn't matter. If they like a certain cover for their phone, they are going to order it online. And I'm sure a company that is specialized in printing, 3D printing, covers for iPhones, they are going to 3D print it in Alat and deliver it to them in less than 24 hours. So you can imagine with the changing trend in business of the 21st century, because we are now aggressively going into this e-commerce concept, e-currency, e-commerce, you know, virtual and on-time delivery, being close to a final customer becomes a key. And this brings a lot of advantages to this region, because one thing, you order something from China, it comes in 2 days, 3 days. In the future, this timing of waiting 3 days will have to be reduced to 24 hours or even less. So these perishable goods, you know, high electronics, these are the things that have to be close to the market. Samsung, iPhone, they compete to get to the market first. Whoever is going to, so the closer you are to the final customer, that is going to define your success. Certainly the recent events in the region gives hope that finally this a rather small region that has been torn apart by these conflicts is finally going to see some peaceful development. And I hope this is going to lead to much better integration, much better cooperation that will kind of remove all the possibility of another wars in this part, and bring a situation whereby everyone will feel that this is a win-win for all. Because this hub concept, inherently, it's a win-win. The question I often ask, you know, aren't you afraid of competition with other ports or other hubs? And I always say, you know, competition is good. Why? Because if I have port and hub that is growing, I want in Georgia or in Armenia or Turkmenistan or Kazakhstan to have similar hubs there. Why? Because as they grow, I will grow, because they feed me in a way and I feed them. So this trade interconnection is going to be a win-win for all, and everybody is going to develop. Okay, some will be a 5 stars, some will end up being a 4-star, but nonetheless, some of these used to be or didn't have any chances of becoming a 2-star would suddenly have the opportunity to become a 4-star or a 3-star. So all this obviously brings a possibility for a quite brighter future in the next 10 years, I would say. On this, with your permission, I would stop, and maybe we can open the floor for questions.
Thank you, Taleh. Very, how to say, enlightening, informative, as well as full of promise for future development. And that's what we had hoped to learn. So what I've asked people to use the raise hand function to ask their questions and think about them, or you can put them in the chat. But before we go into that, I would like to start with one, ask you to elaborate further on the point that you raised, which is, I think, the most important one in many ways. Shall we get your presentation down and have you more present? Now we go. So Taleh, the key thing that came across is that this notion of hub and how it's a consolidator to add value, and you did go to some extent to describe how that can be done. I was wondering what within Azerbaijan, in which particular way, which particular sectors you believe where the largest opportunities lie in developing this, value addition. I was wondering if you had thoughts on that.
Great question. Obviously, Dr. Saxena, before, when I say in 2018 this law was passed and certain preparation work was done, this obviously is taking many years to prepare. So there was a full-blown study that was done by BCG Group and together with the DP World, which looked more than 200 plus industries around the world. And out of them, about 17 were in a way short-listed. And within that, about 13 of them have been shortlisted. I can, from what I remember, I can tell you, for example, logistics, transport, then fertilizers, oil and gas related value adds, for example. These are the, and I don't remember the rest, but these were the ones that were very competitive. When you put a 1,000 kilometer, in a way, this radius concept that I put forward, so that certain distributions and where timing and value add concept makes sense with respect to delivering to 130 million. So about 13 or so industries have been identified, but the most prominent of them, as far as I remember, was primarily on logistic transport, oil and gas related, fertilizer related, and a couple of others, primarily on furnitures and all that stuff, that you can be very competitive with respect to this region. But sometimes, you may you may be surprised that sometimes certain industries come to you without you even thinking that they were initially be competitive. But your legal framework actually may be so attractive to them that they may relocate from some other places and come to you. But as I said in my presentation, that you probably with COVID as well, so that some of the manufacturers in China, for example, are now moving actually closer to the kind of customer areas. These are primarily EU, you know, and being close to EU, not necessarily in EU, because of regulations, etc. Now EU is much more complicated, but being closer to EU, and that adds a lot of value for these big manufacturers, which will be kind of dependent still on certain things that will be assembled in China,
right,
but they could be finished in a way in areas that is very close to final customer.
That's very good. No, thank you for that's very, very clear. And I think there are further opportunities really in terms of certain new kind of technologies that, you know, which are not really addressed globally now. And Central Asia and Azerbaijan together has a great potential in these areas because there's no other player at the moment. And but that's for another discussion, which I can probably take over your talk. Your presentation was very popular already before it started. So we had a number of people who had already sent their questions since yesterday. And we have people here who have already raised their questions now. So what I will start with the previous ones which have come already in the queue before. So first I would ask Neil Watson to open his mic and ask his question that he sent in yesterday.
Thank you very much for a very informative presentation today, and I'm delighted to see that Armenia is now being very much integrated into this mix. It's going to be a great development for them and for the general region. My question is really, how can the UK increase its involvement in the new Silk Road, which obviously is connecting China with Europe? What are the opportunities for British business there?
And Neil, thank you for the question. I think recently there was a visit of one of the ministers of UK to Azerbaijan. I think it was yesterday or the day
was,
before.
yes.
Yeah, so obviously BP, particularly BP, has been one of the prime investors in Azerbaijan, but this has, in a way, has been primarily in oil sector. Now that BP is rebranding itself beyond petroleum, I think this is a good branding and strategy for British businesses with respect to this region too. It is, I think, untapped area for a lot of British companies. But Azerbaijan, as I have said, Britain and British businesses are very active in Dubai.
Yes, they are.
And in the GCC. And if you follow the trend, especially since 2018 or so, with some regulatory introductions in Dubai, particularly VDAT, etc., some of the businesses started to have second thoughts about whether Dubai is going to be the prime location for the next, let's say, decade. And if you ask me, this is just my take on this. Once Alat becomes a full-blown free zone, similar to, let's say, Dubai, I'm assuming that a lot of British companies that are primarily working in serving what they were serving in GCC to these final customers, and they are going to relocate to Azerbaijan. A lot of companies that use made in China components, but finish it somewhere else, they are also going to be relocated to Alat. I give you a simple example of one of my meetings, let's say, okay, that this is maybe not Britain, but Poland, for example. You would be amazed that Polish businesses, they bring a lot of things from China, they finish it in Poland, they sell some of these things to EU, but a sizable amount of goods they sell back to us in Central Asia. So when I propose to them, why don't you finish it, let's say, in Alat, and then whatever you sell to us, you sell to us, and with the because of free tax regime, etc., you will have a much better environment in actually doing it in Azerbaijan. And then whatever you want to sell into EU or Turkey or to Russia, you sell from here. And it made a lot of sense. So similar concept is going to apply to all the British companies that are going to see this region as a potential kind of market. And I'm sure there is this region as a whole, and I don't talk about only South Caucasus, but also Central Asia. I don't know about Iran, but sooner or later this also will have to be sorted out with respect to if sanctions are left, etc., will be left.
Yes,
then
absolutely.
All these things are opening new opportunities for businesses that want to serve this entire region as a whole. And I don't think a lot of British companies have been looking into this region.
No.
At least recently they started, but we really need to do a lot of work in order to basically attract them. But this is opening up a lot of opportunities for them.
Absolutely, it's a wonderful opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil. Next, we have Professor Munira Shahidi from Dushanbe, although sitting in Moscow at the moment.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much indeed. It was absolutely great for me, especially. Well, you know, Tajikistan and Azerbaijan, they have special ties and special historical contacts, but I'm mostly in the poetics of the Silk Road, not on logistics, but still from the very beginning of 90s, I'm talking about how to bring some human sense into today's relationship and communications. Because it's absolutely true that Azerbaijan is much more forward in logistics, in hubs, and in the concept of hubs. But what makes it interesting for Tajikistan today, let's say, is that today Tajikistan is going to make a huge exhibition in Dubai. And we have some specialists here from Tajikistan. Munira Yuldasheva, are you here? Maybe here, maybe not. But what is very important for me as a person who is in human studies is to develop contacts within intercultural communication of these three regions, Arab world, Central Asia, Azerbaijan, talking more about our potential. I'm not talking about manuscripts and joint studies for a long time of, let's say, Nizami and many other poets, and miniatures, which is now going through a new period of digitalization, you know, making that new approach, collecting them. And from that point of view, we need very much to improve our collaboration, academic collaboration of two countries. I mean, Tajikistan and Azerbaijan. From my point of view, I'm worried at the moment that young generation is not very much interested in that, though technological development at the moment has no that basic knowledge, especially for young generation. So what would be your suggestion to empower these contacts, connections, and to make this logistics you are talking more alive from human, you know, values?
Thank you, Munira.
And yeah, that was
Taleh,
my question. Yeah, thank you.
You're muted, I'm afraid, Taleh.
Thank you very much for the question. Of course, we cannot beat dry fruit from Tajikistan or grapes from Tajikistan. There is no parallel. Azerbaijan, as good grapes as we have, we cannot come close to any fruits and dry fruits from Tajikistan. Tajikistan is obviously has a very peculiar place in Central Asia. It is a little logistically, it has some difficulties. More recently, this has been addressed. And I know there has been internal changes within the government, and some of the ministers have changed. A new generation, new blood in a way came that knows this logistics sector and economic part of it very well. You have very active ambassador in Azerbaijan, Rustam Bey, who is trying to do his best in order to both economically and also human-wise interconnect. I think there has to be interaction has to increase, because if we want to, regardless of any sphere, whether economically or otherwise, if you do not have frequent interactions, you cannot really develop any meaningful kind of approaches towards, be it literature, be it human interactions. This year, Azerbaijan has announced as a year of Nizami. So this is a very important year where a lot of events could happen that could involve also Tajik academics as well. So my modest suggestion is probably activate diplomatic ties that will also link to academic ties. There is ADA University that I was previously affiliated with, which is very active in international exchanges, and I know that they have some Tajik students as well. But this needs to be maybe go beyond just this, and joint maybe centers have to be set up in, let's say, in universities in Azerbaijan as well as in universities of Tajikistan, with the co-chairs from both sides that could kind of facilitate these researches. With actually considerable grants could be found for such researches, both in Azerbaijan and Tajikistan. So
hopefully you'll
I would also talk,
as well.
I would also talk to Ambassador here to suggest. Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Munira. Next question comes from Tural Mamadov, and after that, Dr. Iskandar Abdullahi from Carrick, if he's still here. Tural, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Taleh. Thank you, Tural Mamadov, joining from London. So my question is, so you mentioned a lot about the rail freight infrastructure. So this all, I guess, the future of digitalization. So this all requires a lot of capital. My questions maybe partially is given by Neil, but to be more specific is, what's the current appetite from foreign investors, from the banks, and is there kind of certain challenges that that we can overcome and to attract more foreign capital on that basis?
Excellent question. Actually, this is very much relevant. And if you noticed that I spent a part of my presentation on the legal regime, I think a lot of people do not understand that the key, one of the key for a success in your hub strategy is not your location, is not necessarily the labor costs in your country, but sometimes the key, the critical ingredient without which the success would not be possible, it is the legal regime. You may have best location, your labor costs may be very good, but if you do not have political macroeconomic stability and predictable legal regime under which banks, foreign direct investment businesses could feel that they are comfortable in operating, then you will not be able to succeed. And that's precisely one of the most important reasons why we think our project is going to be successful, because of the law. While drafting this law, Azerbaijan has looked probably in many cases across the world, from Dubai to some of the Malaysian experiences, China's experience, all free zones, special economic zones, etc. And they came up with probably the most progressive one, saying that businesses of the 21st century have to feel like they are in Hong Kong, in Dubai, in London. So if they don't feel it, most likely the environment that you are creating, ecosystem, is going to be kind of very different to them, and it will kind of will be in a way not attractive. So this was the key element. And I think first element is there. Political and macroeconomic stability is there. And if you look, as I said, to this region as a whole on the map, you will see that this is in a way untapped region, despite the fact that we talk about, okay, that this region has been contributor of energy, etc. Yes, in energy, yes, it has been tapped for more than a century, but in any other spheres of commercial business, this region as a whole, including Central Asia, is untapped. So there is obviously a lot of interest by the foreign direct investments. So the major role indirectly, obviously, to answer your question, how receptive are the governments to this foreign direct investment? At least for Azerbaijan, and I think for Georgia, I can also tell that this is very open, meaning Azerbaijan, a couple of years ago, president said the oil era is over. We have to look for non-oil economy. And now the entire focus, at least in Azerbaijan, is to make sure that you open up these non-oil economic areas for foreign direct investments. And my belief is the reason why Alat was created is precisely to create an island where foreign direct investors could come in and invest directly without any hesitation. The good example of this is our oil sector. I quickly maybe give you an example of 1994. Imagine 25 years ago, more than 25 years ago, 1994, we didn't have a new constitution. Our new constitution came in 1995. In 1994, a consortium of companies, including BP, signed, as you know, production sharing agreement. This is a separate, in a way, a de facto free zone that was created in the economy of Azerbaijan in the oil sector. This has proven to be so successful that this island, in a way, had its own rules and regulations, very up to international standards. And it has proven to be successful because it flourished. Companies came in, invested, and that investment paid back, and that those revenues, Azerbaijan started to investing into non-oil economy. If we waited for new constitution to be adopted, for new legislations in other sectors to be adopted, for institutional reforms, etc., I can guarantee those things probably would not have happened. So in a way, you have a model that has proven to be successful by creating an island whereby all the best practices could be applied immediately while you do reforms in other parts. So Azerbaijan does reform in its non-oil economy. This process is going to last maybe 5 years, 10 years. Not to wait this while doing this, you can also create a pilot project where you have this island with the system that is very familiar for international business. And I think this is a model, in my view, should be duplicated, copied, and applied elsewhere. You cannot develop Afghanistan overnight. But Mazar-i Sharif, a small part, you can create a small, in a way, project with the free zone, with a completely different system that will assure certain businesses and foreign direct to invest there. And then from there, you multiply this and expand. Similar things have to happen with other hubs across our region. You know, this strategy, and I I'm not saying, I mean, this is truly original in a way, because in Azerbaijan, we started developing it much earlier than One Belt, One Road initiative. One Belt, One Road initiative came up in 2013. And the decision on moving port to Eilat was in 2007. So this concept of hub, in a way, is a very good model for others to replicate and apply. And there is a big appetite on the part of foreign direct investment to come and invest in this region because it's untapped.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Taleh. Thank you, Taleh.
Thank you, Taleh. Dr. Abdullah, Iskandar Abdullah, are you here still? Please do ask your question.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Saxena. Thank you, Dr. Ziyadov, excellent presentation. We met each other in Tbilisi about knowledge sharing corridors, but now we're talking real corridors. My question is...
I think three of us were on the same panel.
Yes, exactly. I think
Yes.
that's really very relevant still topic. But I would like to ask you, you rightly underlined that the way which is to Azerbaijan and Caucasus is a very good link for landlocked countries of Central Asia. Today, ADB have launched regional integration analysis. And again, Central Asia, Kargil region became least integrated region among all other parts of Asia. But we have an opportunity. I mean, actually through the port in Baku and Turkmenabad and also in Kazakhstan, we could really link strongly the Central Asia with other parts of the world. I remember the governments of Central Asia have visited Azerbaijan a few times exactly to make agreements, maybe even special provisions for Central Asian countries. Did it work? If yes, do you have any agreement with Central Asian countries? This is the part of the question. And second part, why still having been so much open and so much advantage for the Central Asia, why still we are observing slow tendency to grow? I know 2020 is special, it's COVID-19, but if we take out the COVID-19, what are the other major obstacles? Thank you, Dr. Ziyadov, once more.
Okay, it's good to see you again. Obviously, the first question, you are right that Azerbaijan has taken a very peculiar approach to Central Asian countries. President has visited some of them. There are directly intergovernment committees between Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan. All these committees are working on regular basis. So at least on the Azerbaijan part, this is taken very seriously. Up to COVID year, we have been, and I am also a member of some of these committees, intergovernmental committees. We have been meeting basically regularly. So there is a very good relationship, for example, with Turkmenistan, especially on fertilizer, on oil and gas related fields, and also other fields. And nowadays, recently, before COVID, obviously, this was Uzbekistan. Uzbekistan now opening up. A very good committee ongoing with Kazakhstan. I think with Kazakhstan, we are probably the most integrated, in a sense. With Turkmenistan, we started integrating very seriously. But you are right that in the past, interconnection of Central Asian countries themselves have been, in a way, problematic. But I think in the last 10 years, a lot of things have changed. In a way, today, the majority of countries in Central Asia have realized that trade and transport actually benefits them. Turkmenistan, for example, has built a brand new port on the Caspian. You know, if you ask me a question, how are you going to fill it? Certainly not just with Turkmen fertilizer. There has to be other goods that are going to come, going from, let's say, Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, and other places towards, let's say, West. But there will be lots of cargo that is going to Turkmenistan, to Uzbekistan, and Afghanistan, and Tajikistan through this port. So this inherently made Turkmenistan, in a way, as a shareholder in this project. So it is suddenly became an interested party in making sure that their connections with Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan and Afghanistan are there, and it works. That's why, for example, Turkmenistan itself also proposed this Lapis Lazuli initiative, for which we are also one of the participants. So you see that this trend, especially in the last 10 years, have shifted in the right direction. And I think in the next 5 years, you are going to see the improved tendency of cooperation and increase in interconnectivity. The second part of your question, I think it is linked to economics. You know, okay, you know, how much, what you can carry. You have to diversify your economy to be able to export, import, transit. You know, if you have limited scope for your trade and economics, there will be obviously a limited amount of cargo that you are going to pass or export, import, or transit. Certainly, this is going to improve with China's coming in and certain cargo that is aimed for, let's say, Southeast Europe, Turkey, maybe Northern Iran, etc. They are still going to go through these routes, but we have to diversify and aggressively open up our economies to grow our economies, to diversify our economies. Only when companies come in, start producing something, then you will be able to import certain things, export certain things, and add value to your national economy. So the second question is obviously also inherently, and I think directly linked to the ability of these countries to diversify and improve their economies.
Thank you, Taleh. So we are getting so many questions, and your answers are fantastically clear and detailed. So I will, not everybody has been able to raise their hand, so I'm going to read out from the chat. So Robin Seward has the next question. Robin, are you there?
Yes, I am, Monta. Yes, thanks very much indeed. That was a fascinating presentation, and I was very pleased to listen to it. Thank you. One aspect of the development is a concern, I think, for everyone, and that is that whilst the opening of a trade route, the re-establishment of a silk route, if you will, again, is something that will affect and impact a huge number of countries in the region and beyond. There is a tendency these days for people to look at business and ignore some of the more basic fundamentals. And in this case, I'm referring to the ecology, the unique ecology of Azerbaijan. And unique is the right word. It has the majority of the world's climatic zones in such a small area. And I'm particularly concerned about the Shirvan region in particular, which of course is extremely vulnerable. The building of a super port and its infrastructure. And I'm wondering what efforts have been made to ensure that that's going to preserve, not just for tourism, but for the global ecological economy. Thank you.
Robin, very valid and actually very genuine question that is really, I'm not sure if you are familiar with what Port of Baku has done recently, but we are the first port that became a green port, eco port, in this part of the world in 2019. This is eco port certification is European Ports Organization. They assigned this eco port certification, and it actually has been from the start, because it took us 3 years to go and get the certification. And this is obviously done on genuine belief that it has to be integrated with whatever you do, has to be well integrated with your community, around community. Okay, that this is not secret, I think I can share with you. We are doing very unique projects in this part of the world. Close to port, there are multiple islands. One of the islands, actually very interestingly, in the Soviet times, you know, gazelles, that you were referring to Shirvan Reservoir, not reservoir, reserve. There is a Shirvan Reserve. For those of you who do not, Shirvan is a place that is close to the port, a little south. It's a forest area, and lots of gazelles are actually live there, and it is preserved area, so it's a restricted area. But in the Soviet times, at the time, they decided some of these gazelles could also live in deserted island as an experiment. So they moved some of the island some of the gazelles to this island in order to observe them, whether they will survive there or not. Which they survived. Actually, their size have increased, but afterwards, obviously, logistic, going there, feeding them, because there was no vegetation there, and they had to cancel this. They gathered all the gazelles they could kind of catch, and they moved it into Shirvan reserve. What happened? Apparently, at this island, a number of these gazelles were left. About 9 or so were left, and eventually they had to kind of survive on their own. And their numbers have increased, but they were naturally kept at certain amounts. And we recently have been involved with WWF together. We are actually on a program to kind of serve these gazelles. And believe it or not, these gazelles have not only survived, but they also learned how to drink salty water of Caspian. So it's a very rare case when gazelles actually drinking salty waters and trying to survive on a very little vegetation. There are a number of islands nearby the port. We are now working together with WWF on migratory birds. And there is a project that we are currently working on to open to visitors. So there are migrating birds like flamingos, etc. They come every year to our port, and we have some of the pictures on our website as well. So to basically answer your question, sustainability and green policy is part of our strategy from start. We have a number of solar panel projects that we want to develop together with EBRD and gradually move into this zero emission concept. In this year, I think we are going to launch the development of zero emission target for our maybe next 10 years. So this is a part of our development, and just to assure you that we make sure that nothing bad happens to our immediate environment or any environment that is close to us within 100 kilometers or so. So I think you are in the safe hands.
Yeah, you know, Taleh, when you're thinking of solar, it'd be good to have a conversation, because solar, the way it's being done, using old style silicon panels is completely the wrong way to go about.
Yes.
There's a specific opportunity, especially for an oil producing country like Azerbaijan, to move to plastic and organic based solar, which were actually invented in Cambridge. And they are no use here because we don't produce that much oil, but they can be very useful in a geography like Azerbaijan.
Excellent.
Ludmila Sharimatova, are you there? Ask your question. Ludmila? Okay. So in this case, Yingfeng, another PhD student from Cambridge. Yingfeng?
Yeah. Thanks, Taleh, for the wonderful presentation. I'm a PhD in Cambridge. Actually, my PhD project is tracking the implementation of One Belt, One Road. And I noticed that Azerbaijan and China signed an MOU on like jointly build the new Silk Road economic belt in 2015. And the Alat port you mentioned is one of the key projects under the cooperation. I wonder, like, beyond the cooperation document on the top, on the ground, what kind of support does China give to this, to this project, like in terms of like financial or technical support, or does it help to strengthen the negotiation with other Caspian port countries?
Excellent. So this question is very relevant, and to put you into context, it's important to understand what, for example, China does internationally. And on many cases, this is obviously understood slightly different. Like, Sri Lanka case with the port, etc. This sometimes understood as China taking over the country's infrastructure, etc. But to put it aside, obviously Azerbaijan is slightly different because Azerbaijan is oil rich. To build its own infrastructure, we never needed any kind of financial support from China or from any other countries. But in what we will need China's support is obviously a closer cooperation with the trading routes. So obviously we want many containers that are aimed for region, for Mediterranean, for Southeast Europe to come through us. And we have been working very closely with a number of Chinese companies like Costco, China Merchants, and others we have invited. They have come to port, they visited, but because of COVID, obviously, certain break has been to our cooperation. But I think eventually a number of Chinese companies they are going to come and maybe act in a role of terminal operators, logistic kind of partners, logistic companies, but a lot of also manufacturing firms from China, as I said, will be moving closer to the final destination markets. So instead of Chinese companies serving Turkish market from China, they would most likely move to Alat and develop their facilities here, and from here they will serve Turkey or EU or any other countries in the region. So that's, I think, so far as when it comes to our cooperation. I think once this COVID pandemia era kind of ends or eases, there will be a much closer links or visits actually of Chinese delegates to Azerbaijan and also Azerbaijan to China.
Thank you. Thank you, Taleh. I know that we're taking a lot of your time, but people are really
problem.
interested, and I hope you can spare a little bit more with us. Ludmila Shermetova couldn't unmute herself. Could Jakub please read her question for Taleh's benefit?
Let me just get to the question. Yes.
It's a question from Yelena.
That the change in White House can affect from Ludmila Sheremetova. Do you expect that the change in White House can affect Azerbaijan regional ambitions, especially in respect of energy security? We know that Nord Stream 2 pipeline can change global energy balance.
Excellent. Well, honestly, you know, Azerbaijan, if you look at obviously this is slightly in the energy sector, but it's okay. I can address them too, as far as I know. Azerbaijan has recently, as you know, completed this TANAP project and TAP project as well. So we are, as we speak, can export our gas directly to Italy. So this is a big achievement that has been done, completed. And there is also interconnections to other European countries that will be developed further. Change in the White House, I don't think it's going to directly or indirectly affect us, because what we do is actually something that any country or either regional or global country would want the regional countries to do, basically interconnection, interconnectivity, and connection with the world, much liberal system in economic development. So these are all the notions that I think major players in the world would want any country to go about. So in that sense, I don't see any kind of direct or positive or negative, basically. What we do is, in a way, has on its own positive implications, but if they also support these initiatives, I think that will only have a positive impact. Let's wait and see.
Thank you. Next, we have Tamara. Tamara, would you like to unmute yourself?
Yeah. Yes, I've just unmuted. First of all, it's lovely to see the new generation of scholars like you.
Tamara Hanım, Pleasure to see you.
Happy to see you. My question is, what is going to be the direct contact between the port of Batumi and the port of Poti? We in Great Britain have just started to experience the changes that are taking place post-Brexit in our dealings between Dover and Calais. Now, for your plan to work, there has to be a direct link between the port of Batumi and the port of Poti and the port of Baku, having the same requirements for documents, the same everything, in a sense. Whatever you're going to do, they must match. And what work is being done? Because after all, it is through Georgia, probably more than through Turkey, that you're going to reach the West and the United States and the rest of the Western world, so to speak. So I wonder what work is being done, because if they don't match, I don't think it's going to work.
Rightly so, and actually our prime partners in this trade is, at the moment, it's Poti, but with the recent developments in Batumi, especially with the fertilizer terminal that is built, also with the involvement, I think, of Tramo company, which is a US company, we are going to also work very closely with Batumi. You are right, and the way we see it, we see Poti, Batumi, and Alat as two ends of a single tunnel. So for anything to work, obviously, the tunnel has to work properly. There is one entrance and one exit, and the entrance and exit parts have to work very efficiently for more cargo to come. So far, we have been very successful in coordinating our efforts, but obviously there are certain things that go beyond port. Ports, it's the receiving or kind of exiting parts, but railways, highways, and all that other parts are essential for making sure the logistics are done. At least in Azerbaijan, there has been very positive developments. Transit Council has been created with the involvement of all major government agencies and SOEs, as well as the ministry. It's chaired by Minister of Economy right now. And this council basically handles all issues that could arise if there is any problems on this route. So if there are problems with custom, these issues are raised there and resolved immediately. If the issue of cross-border crossing and all that stuff, they have been raised to this council and resolved properly. The next level is obviously goes beyond just Georgia and Azerbaijan, which includes all the way the route from, let's say, China and to Europe. As you know, there are a number of challenges there regarding the documentations. You know, custom declaration in China is one thing, here is different, in Europe is different. And this needs to be, in a way, a coordinated effort. You know, Traseka for a long time, you know, Traseka is an EU project for a long time. It tried to do it, but for whatever reason, it kind of declined. Now it wants to come back again. And it depends on EU's kind of help and motivation, whether they want to help this organization to come up and actually deal with this regulatory framework and help to come up with a single kind of documentation that is going to ease the process. But the most recent trend with digitalization tells me that one way or another, maybe in a couple of years, we are going to see a very efficient digital corridor that will solve this issue. So the aim, obviously, to make, in a way, a blockchain type of technology that will have a one single document entered in China that will be visible throughout this corridor all the way to Poti, let's say, and further down. That's the aim. But is it easy to implement? As you can imagine, this is a very complex endeavor that involves not only ministries, not only SOEs, but a number of fields at the same time: border crossing, customs, you know, ports, railways, shippings, and etc. But this is inevitable. I mean, we are going to move there. we already started. At least Port of Baku works with OECE on this, on green port and digitalization. We have a separate dedicated project on this. We are working together with Turkmenbaşı, Akdağ ports, and now we are also going to join our Georgian partners on this side. And this is going to pave a way for a better integrated system, which you and I also as well hope to see very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Taleh, the questions are so many. I don't think we can probably take them all. There's a list growing. So, what I would, if you think it will serve your purpose, we can let people ask. Several people ask the questions, and then you can respond to the bits that you may, or you prefer to just go one by one. What it's
no, I can go immediately. For example, Sally, greetings to you. Good to see you. You are in good shape, I can see. Digital cybersecurity of ports, not only ports, I think cybersecurity of the entire supply chain. This is the probably much more important one. This is going to gain much more relevance in the coming years. At least we ourselves, we see it essential, but as we integrate this issue of cybersecurity of not only ports, but the entire supply chain is going to become a very important concept. We are working now very closely with our Kazakh friends and Turkmen friends. The first step of this whole thing is first to integrate digitally, because you build your own island, they build their own island. If we don't talk to each other, then we have an issue. So the first step in this to make sure that our IT structures, IT communications talk to each other properly. But in overall, obviously, this cybersecurity is going to be a much more important for the entire region as a whole. We are working, I wouldn't name the companies, but we are working closely on making sure that this is the port cybersecurity is in good hands. But as I said, this has not yet became a regional effort. So there is we probably need to go on that one.
Thank you. There was a question by someone who urged me to ask you, but they had to leave themselves. So I'll read that to you. It's from Samit Meherali. And let me find the question now in the chat, unless you can see it as well. Okay. Very busy chat. Okay.
Did you? I can see here Akram Umarov about Uzbekistan.
Yeah, you can.
So maybe I go and you pick up your questions. For example, Uzbekistan is trying to introduce English common law. Is there any similar experience in Baku? Obviously, I'm familiar with Uzbekistan special economic zones. I've been to Novayi about 10 years ago or 15 years ago. And obviously at the time, the reason why I would say it didn't work, because it wasn't done the way now Uzbekistan is doing. Introduction of common law is one of the critical components. In Azerbaijan, there is no definition, this or that other law applies. It basically says the business can choose whatever law it deems necessary for conducting business. So if the British law is the one that two businesses choose as a governing law, they will be able to choose so. So it's because Uzbekistan is on the right track and actually has a great potential for developing this.
Okay, so I found my question from Samit Meherali. He says, I have a question to Dr. Taleh Ziyadov on technical integration part of his amazing project with leading suppliers, i.e. Alibaba and Amazon. Are there any plans to create a technical framework for such kind of integration within the nearest future, since we are moving to digital shopping platforms worldwide?
The question here, I would, in a way, rephrase the question. Who should do it, is the question. Should it Port Authority or port lead this technical requirement and try to do it, or should we create an ecosystem for Alibaba, Amazon, and the likes to come in, to do their work properly and start leading this process?
Right.
And I think a good example of this is, believe it or not, BP. You know, BP in the oil sector has become a champion in leading all this process with Baku Tbilisi Ceyhan pipeline. Until
We've lost Taleh there.
I think it has to be Amazon's, Alibaba's that should come, settle there, settle here and start developing their technical, logistic services, and then expand. And it is inevitably, this is how it should happen.
Thank you. How that's actually, yeah, I completely agree with you there. It needs to be the other way around. Ali Tekin, please, if you're still here.
Thank you, Dr. Saxena, and thank you, Taleh. I just I couldn't help reading the comment my good friend, Dr. Tamara Dragets has just written. She says, so good to see the new generation of scholars of the caliber of Taleh Ziyadov to apply his knowledge to the real world. Congratulations. And that he's optimistic is also comforting, because that this is how the dreams come true. So it's a great project for Baku Port, which integrates the new railway line from Baku, or in fact from Beijing to London, we call it. And obviously that's the main aim, is to be the intersection of this great old but now great new Silk Road. My personal position is I'm not an economist or a scientist, I'm just a medical doctor, but I want to inject a little bit of history that I am probably the only person actually lived on the Silk Road. I was born in Kars in eastern Turkey, which was the end of the railway line, which was the vital gauge, and then it ended up in Kars, and the Russian railways was a different gauge, so the trains couldn't continue. But I remember even in the 50s and 60s, I remember well, my father was a merchant which dealt with import and export, and I used to help him to load the livestock, the cows and the sheep onto the train, and off went to Russia, and there was no money exchange, it was all bartering. And they came back the farm machinery from Russia, because technologically Turkey at that time wasn't able to produce farm machinery. And unfortunately, with the Armenians' greed by invading and then holding on to Karabakh, the railway was obviously closed. The border between Turkey and Armenia was closed. What I want to say is that we left out Armenia altogether in this context of the new Silk Road. But I'm hoping that with this Second Karabakh War, when the dust settles, Armenia will realize that it is losing too much by insisting on this dogmatic view of the whole of Azerbaijan and Turkey, and animosity to cooperate with them. And this is going to be totally against their economic interests. So if the Armenia slowly comes around, the dust settles, and then it starts cooperating, would this change the policy of this Silk Road going through perhaps Armenia, through Iran, circumventing the Caspian Sea and going to the Central Asia? Is there a possibility of that? And just another thing I want to add is that recently, as you know, there is a very problematical nuclear power station in the border of Turkey and Armenia, only 16 kilometers from Turkish border, which I haven't personally, when I go there, I can see that side of the river. Now there's great pressure on Armenia to dismantle and change their energy program. they're resisting, I mean, economic and the psychological, or they don't want to do anything that's been imposed on by Turkey or Russia. In fact, if and I believe there's big conversations or discussions going on for them, for Armenia to join this economic development of the South Caucasus. Number one, going to be for them to close that very dangerous, very outdated power station. What is your opinion, Taleh? Armenia coming into the fold, cooperating, and then joining this project, please?
Well, basically, my entire presentation was about this, and I'm an optimist, and I think it's going to be next 10 years is going to be good for all of us, including Armenia. And hopefully we are going to see a well-integrated, well-connected, peaceful, stable, and sustainable South Caucasus, where Armenia is going to be integrated in all the processes that we are going to see in the next 10 years. So because you can't physically remove either Azerbaijan or Armenia and send one to Mars and the other to Venice and say, okay, let's leave. We live in the same small region, so we have to cooperate. And I think common sense will prevail. And at the end of the day, we are going to work closely, and this is going to benefit all our countries. Dr. Saxena, if you permit, I read immediately a couple of questions from here. Yelena, yes, asking about Alat FTZ and whether the what's the current stage and as operator has been chosen. For Alat Free Trade Zone, there is a separated, dedicated free zone authority that was created in 2019. That authority is headed by a gentleman called, he was one of the prime figures in Azerbaijan. He used to be involved in the production sharing agreement drafting in 1994, Vali Alaskerov, a prominent man. He is in charge of this process, but as far as I know, no operator is chosen so far. So currently the project is ongoing and the preparation work is on the way. So I don't know if and when an operator will be chosen, but so far no operator has been chosen. Another question from Tina about EU-Azerbaijan Partnership and Cooperation Agreement. I know this is very important for Azerbaijan, but we, as a port, we work very closely with EU. We have completed a number of initiatives, including these green port initiatives that I mentioned. We are going to continue our work with EU very closely. We have another project that has recently been launched. And I think EU-Azerbaijan partnership only going to benefit Azerbaijan and I think the region as a whole, because at the end of the day, for Azerbaijan, EU is also not only for Azerbaijan, but also for China or for India, for any Asian countries. EU is also a big market. So if you put into context the hub concept that I have described, in this scenario, EU becomes a very important partner for Azerbaijan and for also for other players that want to transit through Azerbaijan into EU. So in that sense, EU-Azerbaijan partnership and cooperation, I think, is going to develop and strengthen. As we say, there is one question from Resham Singh Sandhu. Resham, I can assure you once this COVID ends, you are my, I can extend the invitation to you so you can come.
Well, I can answer this question on your behalf. Being Indian, who visits Azerbaijan for more than 20 years, frequently with friends, and I can assure you in every full sense that you will be welcome and the most delightful visits you'll have there.
So we have quite a number of diverse cultures, as you can, you know, Dr. Saxena knows, from Zoroastrian temples to Jewish synagogues to Russian Orthodox churches to Armenian churches, and obviously Azerbaijan, I think it's a good example of this melting pot.
Right. So we can open up our Sikh temple as well as a Hindu temple. There is no problem.
No problem at all. I can assure.
I'll slightly modify what Taleh mentioned there. That it's whole Central Asia region and Caucasus region. It's not a melting pot. It's something much better. I always call it when I teach. I call it's a salad bowl. It's colorful. It has individual meaning and a collective meaning at the same time. It doesn't melt into one single identity. It's vibrant, and I think that's how I see as a colorful, vibrant, alive thing, rather than a molten pot, which is static in some sense.
That's really great. Very good news. So I will hoping to visit after this coronavirus disappears, and also try to meet Dr. Taleh and see how it is going to benefit, because there are a lot of my friends from Hindu culture as well as from Punjabi or Sikh culture. They are business people here. They really like to divert their attention towards those countries. And because I am member of Anglo-Azerbaijan society here, but now that has been disappeared according to Neil. And I love to visit Baku. I love to go to that country. I love to just look around and take one or two of my friends with me to invest money in agriculture as well as in the property development.
You would be most welcomed.
Thank you. Thank you. Hopefully I will see you there then.
Hopefully.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
So shall we? I think it's time for lunch and people are getting hungry. Unfortunately, we can't end the event with the fantastic Azeri food and wine and drinks and sweets and tea and pulao and but I like to bring Yaqub back. But before that, Taleh, would you like to say any concluding words?
I mean, I wish you a healthy and a prosperous life, because first and foremost, obviously, is to keep healthy, because these difficult times have shown us that sometimes human interaction is very important, and when we are detached from it, how much we miss it. So I wish every one of us to get back to our normal lives as soon as possible, to be able to travel safely and visit our respective countries soon. I also would like to thank Dr. Saxena for organizing this. This has been enjoyable and very interactive. And if I contributed to any knowledge in this discussion, I'm very humbled, and thank you very much for the opportunity. And hopefully see you all in Baku in the near future.
But thank you. Don't go away. Yaqub, would you like to say the concluding words?
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Saxena, and mainly big thank you to Dr. Ziyadov. I mean, it was wonderfully comprehensive talk and a wonderfully comprehensive discussion. And this is really something what we were hoping for when we were thinking of organizing the series. So really big thank you to you. And for the others, we will continue with the discussions in the coming weeks, and we will send the invites for that. So we are looking forward to continuing with what we have started, I think, in an excellent fashion today. So thank you very much.
Taleh, we remain not only grateful, but very proud of you in every which way. From here in Cambridge, this has been recorded. This will be viewed by many people who couldn't make it because of time zone issues and so on. And we hope we can have you more often to tell us all these detailed answers, which we never get from media, from other things. This is wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.